Well, there's a lot to get to. We're approaching this 1 year anniversary of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine. A lot has happened. Now, I've been seeing a lot of rumblings in the Western mainstream media about Russia's offensive, a lot of alarm bells being sounded, a lot of estimations on when it's going to happen. I've been under the impression that this has already started and that there's been a lot going on the battlefield. What are your thoughts about Russia, where it's at right now? Is it on the offensive? And how would you describe what's going on the ground right now?
Well, there's a saying that's popular. There's a meme about it and all this. FAFO, FAFO. Now, I'm not going to use the proper first word, but fool around, find out is the concept. NATO and Ukraine, which has allowed itself to be used as a proxy, fooled around, and they're about to find out. When this war first started, when we first talked, there was a lot of confusion, especially on my part. I'll be the first one to admit, man, it didn't happen the way I thought it was going to happen. I thought when Russia goes to war, Russia goes to war. Russia rolls in, steamrolls, pounds, etc. And it just shows, here I am, a Russian history major who spent my entire life studying Russia. And apparently I was unable to grasp the notion that Russia could actually be serious about loving Ukraine, that they didn't want this war. I knew they didn't want it, but again, war is war. I mean, I'm a Marine, and you fire the green flare, I'm off for the races, baby. It's all the training kicks in, you do what you got to do, and it's going to get bloody, it's going to gut it, and you're going to win quick. The Russians didn't do that. And so there was a lot of confusion about what the heck was going on. Now that we've had a year, I think we can look at the first month of this conflict from February 24th until roughly, we'll call it a month and a half, February 24th till April 1st. And I think there's a lot more clarity now. Russia never intended to steamroll Ukraine, never intended at all. Russia was in a position where it felt it was compelled to force Ukraine into accepting the peace that Russia was offering before the war. Basically, a modification of the Minsk II agreement where the Donbass would have autonomy, but now because Ukraine pushed it too far, it would be independence. Crimea would be forever Russia, and Ukraine would never join NATO. Those were the Russian objectives. Now, to get Ukraine to that, Russia made a military move. But this was a military move designed to create an impression as opposed to actually destroy. Even though Russia said we want to demilitarize and denazify, it was clear based upon the negotiations that took place, they weren't demanding either one of those. In fact, the final negotiation on March 6th that paved the way for the April 1st meeting in Istanbul, Russia pretty much said, you can have your army. We're not going to demilitarize. You can have your army. You can have your government. We just need you to never join NATO. That's all we need. And these agreements were made. Now we read into what the Russians did. For instance, convincing the Ukrainians that the Russians were serious. Russia had taken a lot of territory. It was threatening Kiev, had taken a lot of areas around Kharkov, Sumy, and suddenly the Russians withdraw. And a lot of people are going, that's because they're weak. That's because they got beat. And I didn't buy into that, but I was like, well, they say they're withdrawing. I took it to mean that they are going to look. I said from the beginning, they had insufficient resources for the task. And now we know why. And people are going, why did they start with 200,000 people? And now we know why. Because Putin and the leadership was very concerned about sanctions. I mean, today we can sit here and at the time I was very confident that Russia would beat the sanctions. But, I'm sitting thousands of miles away. I don't have my pulse on the Russian economy. I think I do. I think I guessed right. But, I don't have to pay the price if we're guessing wrong. Putin gave a speech last year where he said, my guys were telling me 15, 20, 25% contraction of the economy. Hey, that's a lot. 25% contraction. And that, remember James Carville advising Bill Clinton back in the 92, it's the economy, stupid. And that holds everywhere. It's the economy, stupid. And Putin ain't stupid. And he knew that there would be economic problems. And so he couldn't shock the system too much. Already they were anticipating an economic shock from the sanctions. Now they have to go through this special military operation, not a war, a special military operation, which means there's no mobilization. You're using a peacetime complement of forces. Why? Because with an economic shock, you can't shock the population with a mobilization and going to a war footing. Because now we know the war was not popular. The Russian people weren't buying. I mean, they understood about Donbass. They understood about the threat posed by Ukraine and all that, but they weren't thrilled about going to war against Ukraine. And so there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of hesitation amongst the Russian people. And if you shock them with 25% contraction of the economy and mobilization early on, you could get some problems. And I know there's people say, well, Putin's a dictator. What does he have to fear? He ain't a dictator, people. He's a democratically elected president. And he has to be concerned about the electorate, just like every other politician. So he couldn't shock that system. He had to play it slow. So they were trying to get them to the negotiating table, and it worked. I mean, in retrospect, if you take a look at what the Russians wanted to achieve and what they almost achieved, this was a brilliant operation, flawlessly pulled off. I mean, there were some mistakes with the military going forward without flank protection, etc., but they achieved their military objective, which apparently was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table to bring an early end to this conflict, which was always Russia's objective. But when April 1st came, Boris Johnson came also. And Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, put the kibosh on the peace deal. Now, we also have found out that apparently the Ukrainians were negotiating with the West and they were never serious about it. We have the head of the Ukrainian intelligence service saying it was a sham anyways, just like everything else was a sham. But the Russians believed it was real. The Russians thought they were going to get a peace treaty. The Russians thought that this war was going to end early on. And this changes everything, because what the mistake that was made by the West was misinterpreting the Russian withdrawal as a sign of weakness, that Russia had somehow been beaten. No, Russia was playing by its game plan. Russia got the Ukrainians to the table to end this war early. But it didn't happen because NATO said they're weak. NATO said, we're going to double down now, exploit Russia's weakness. And now we come to phase two, where Russia said, well, if you don't want a peace treaty, we're going to focus on liberation of the Donbass, which they were doing. A lot of people don't realize that in June, the Ukrainian army was defeated, literally defeated on the field of battle. They were getting crushed, ground up, spit out, and it was all but over, except that NATO suddenly infused them with tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, financial resources that the Ukrainians were able to marry to manpower and create this 70,000 man strike force that they then launched a counterattack against the, insufficient Russian forces, because Russia never mobilized. Russia wasn't ready for that war. Russia went on a special military operation against Ukraine. Russia was not prepared for a proxy war with NATO. And we saw that, where the Russians had to withdraw from Kharkov, the right bank of Kherson. But then the Russians consolidated, and now we get the FAFO. Because now Russia said, we ain't playing this game anymore. It's no longer, we'll call it a special military operation, but it ain't. It's war. And we're mobilizing 300,000 troops. We have another, we don't know exactly how many volunteers came in. Some people say 100,000, some people say 180,000. I'm thinking they probably have a total of 500,000 troops mobilized as a result of this. They cranked up their defense industry. They're firing on all cylinders. They're pouring out tanks, artillery, the most modern equipment. So these 300, 500,000 are getting the best equipment. And everybody's like, when's the offensive going to be? When they finish training. When's the offensive? When they finish training. The Russians are actually training the troops to accomplish the task. And but the war didn't stop during this time. Even while this mobilization is taking place, the war is continuing. That same war that I told you Russia was winning in June, Russia was winning in November, December, January, February. Right now, Russia's winning. Look at the casualty figures. These are ghastly, ghastly. Zaluzhny, the head of the Ukrainian forces, apparently admitted to Mark Miley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 275,000 dead. And he admitted that a month or so ago. The fighting's been even bloodier since then. So I'm guessing that number is up over 300,000. I personally believe that you can add another 50,000 unaccounted for deaths that the Ukrainians don't want to acknowledge. 350,000 dead. Let's reflect on this. We're coming up to the 1-year anniversary. During the entire Second World War, the United States suffered 300,000 dead, fighting Japan and Germany. Ukraine has suffered 300,000 dead in conflict with Russia in 1 year. And by the time this is over, you might be able to double or triple that number. We could be looking at 250,000 Ukrainian dead by the time this is finished, because FAFO, the FO is about to happen. Find out. The offensive has already started. People need to understand that, most offenses don't begin unless you're starting from the start. There's no war, then there's going to be the green flare, and across the line of departure you go, etc. They're already engaged in battle. The Russians have been advancing on Bakhmut since May, and so that battle's never stopped. And there's always been positional battles going on. But now, as Russia starts to release forces into the battlefield, they're carrying out probing operations all along the offensive line. In Zaporizhia, up by Sumy, now they've got things going on, Uladar and other areas. And what's happened is the Ukrainians are having to divert reinforcements here. So they got very few reinforcements, reserves, and they have to go where the Russians are probing. And so the Russians are absorbing, forcing the Ukrainians to commit their reserves, and the Russians haven't even committed their main battle force yet. So they're probing, crushing, identifying gaps. And when the time comes, the Russians are it's just going to be this. It's like watching a tidal wave come in sometimes. A lot of people think of the tidal wave as this giant wave come crashing in. It's actually a surge that comes up. If you look at those horrible videos from Thailand, just the surge comes up. And then it's just this relentless surge that cannot be stopped. And that's what's getting ready to happen to the Ukrainians. A surge of Russian military offensive operations along the entire front will be taking place. Now, the Russians have said they are only interested in liberating at this point in time Russia, which means the right bank of Kherson will be Russian, Zaporizhia will be Russian, Donetsk, Lugansk will be Russian. But the Russians have put a little caveat on there. Back when we gave the Ukrainians the HIMARS, the high mobility artillery rocket system, 80-kilometer range, the Russians went, well, now it's going to be the territories plus 80, you see, because we have to keep you out of artillery range. We're never going to allow you to fire artillery shells into Russia again. So we're pushing you back for 80 kilometers beyond the borders. Congratulations, Zelensky. You just lost a whole lot more territory. But then the geniuses, they said, hey, America, give us even longer range stuff. So the Americans are talking about giving them this small bomb, this advance at 150 kilometers. Well, all that's going to force the Russians to do is go 150 kilometers in. And now rocket scientists take your little compass, go to the map, get the scale, and then to start drawing the arc rings around the border and see what 150 kilometers is and understand that's pretty much the territory that Ukraine is going to lose forever. That includes Kharkov, probably includes Odessa. This is the end of Ukraine. I think that this offensive is going to begin. It's going to be a surge. And I think, well, it's not what I think. Who cares what I think? Let's talk about what Zelensky or Zelensky thinks. Yeah. Both of them have said, Zelensky basically said, if you don't give me everything I want, this it's over. He said that in an interview to The Economist. Right. It's over. It's over. What does over mean? It means he lost. It's over. And Zelensky has said, if I don't have tanks and airplanes by August, it's over. It's too late. What does that mean? You're going to be beat. They know. They're not stupid. They know what's coming. It's a surge that cannot be stopped. And unless you can pile up a whole bunch of sandbags in the form of F-16s and M1 tanks and Leopard 2 tanks, but they're not going to get those. They're not going to get those in time. And even if they got them in time, there's not enough numbers to actually make a difference. You're not going to beat the surge. You might put up a nice little sandbag wall and say, I'm protected. Nope, the surge is going to pull that through, push through, and you're going to drown. And that's what's going to happen to Ukraine. They're going to get swamped. It's over. Do svidaniya, mama. I don't mean to be too flippant here, but I'm somebody who's been watching this thing just getting frustrated. And you say, well, why are you getting frustrated, Scott? Are you frustrated because the Russians aren't winning quick enough? No, I'm not pro-Russia. I believe Russia's on the right side of history. I'm anti-war. I'm not pure anti-war. Look, I've been honest about it. I'm a Marine. And I did a tweet that got me in trouble with this rally. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later. But someone said, are you anti-war? And I said, no, I'm not anti-war. I said I believe that I love puppy dogs. I love dogs, but if there's a rabid dog, it's got to go down. And we need Atticus Finches out there to shoot them. And if you know the movie To Kill a Mockingbird, you know the scene I'm talking about, where Atticus Finch, the lawyer, is called upon to do the difficult deed of shooting the rabid dog. And then I said Ukraine is the rabid dog and Russia is Atticus Finch. And I firmly believe that. I think the Zelensky regime is a regime that has empowered the odious neo-Nazi ideology of Stepan Bandera, the national hero. The Ukrainian armed forces sing songs in his honor. We can go on and on and on that. So I have no sympathy for the Ukrainian government, but my God, my heart bleeds for the Ukrainian people, not the ones in Western Ukraine. Look, if you put up a statue of Stepan Bandera, FAFO, okay, you're going to find out it ain't going to end pretty for you guys. I am telling you right now, the surge is coming for you, but it's the people that wanted to live their normal lives, the people that went to work, had a job, have a wife, have kids, have parents, grandparents, and they just wanted to live their lives. And those lives are over. Ukraine is being destroyed right now as a modern nation state. That's something I predicted early on. I said this war, when it ends, there will not be a Ukraine. It's coming true. They've already lost 20% of their territory. They're getting ready to lose another 30%. I mean, it's mind-boggling how Zelensky claims to be the president who cares about the Ukrainian people, but he's overseeing the dismemberment of his country and the slaughtering. My God, 300,000 troops dead. That means that there's a whole bunch of wounded guys too. In modern combat, wounds aren't, a nick, a scar. You're losing arms, you're losing legs, your brain's addled, you're pooping into a bag. I don't mean to be too graphic here, but hey, guys, you get gut shot. What do you think happens? All right, it ain't the movies. Oh, no, boom, you're gone. Brains out. I mean, it's real, guys. It's real. And they're getting slaughtered. They're getting butchered. Not just the Ukrainians, too. The Russians are suffering casualties, not on this scale, but the Russians are suffering more casualties per day than we suffered in the Vietnam War at its height. And it broke the back of America at that time. But the Russians are soldiering on. But this is just tragic. And what makes it even more tragic is the United States and NATO made this war happen. There is only one. That's why when people say, oh, we can't let these people speak at the rally because they're pro-Russian. No, guys. We're just calling it as we see it. This conflict is about good versus evil. And let me tell you right now, the evil out there is the United States. The evil out there is NATO. And if you don't recognize that, then I don't want to have anything to do with you. Because if you're trying to pretend that this war wasn't predicated based upon a decision made in 2008 to invite Ukraine into NATO, then you have no clue what you're talking about. If you don't understand the role played in 2014 in the Maidan coup d'etat, don't call it a revolution, it was a coup d'etat, ousting, and how the United States handpicked these people to govern, knowing that they were closely aligned with the neo-Nazis of Sloboda in the right sector, and then turning a blind eye as they declared war on the ethnic Russians. In April, they passed a law calling ethnic Russians terrorists, and they unleashed the Ukrainian army on them. Okay, if you don't understand that, then I don't want to talk with you because you don't know what you're talking about, and that's half the problem here. All the people out there, they're saying, I'm anti-war, I'm anti-war. They don't know what they're talking about. You don't even know what anti-war means. If you think anti-war means pacifism, you don't have a clue about reality because pacifists die. That's the truth. Pacifists get swamped by Hitlers. They get swamped by Imperial Germany. They get swamped by Banderists. Pacifists need people like me who are willing to step up to the plate, draw the line, and say, not one step further, or I will slaughter you, because I am not a pacifist. I'm a warrior. And you want to take me on, you will lose. But I also understand that you have to fight for the right cause. There has to be just cause for this conflict, or else war is just murder. War is murder no matter what. Your humans are killing humans. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to mankind is war. We should never want to go to war. But if we do go to war, be on the right side of history and win. What we're doing right now in Ukraine is evil. It's pure evil. We claim to be the friends of the Ukrainian people. We claim to be their friends, and look at what we've done to them. Yeah. If this is friendship, man, I wouldn't want to be in love with the Ukrainian people because God knows what that would turn into. We're not the friends of the Ukrainian people. We don't care about the Ukrainian people. We put the flags on our social media. They fly everywhere. I see the flag. Really, guys, That's how you treat your friends. You let the U.S. government allow them to be slaughtered on the battlefield. You're destroying. There won't be Ukraine when this is done. How much do you love Ukraine? And the answer is you don't. Want to know why? Because you have no clue what Ukraine is. Anybody who puts that flag up there, I can guarantee you, I could interrogate them for 2 minutes. And it would be clear they don't have a clue what they're talking about. They don't have any grasp of history. They don't have any understanding of the underlying issues. They just put the flag up there because, they're trying to, I forget the term that's used when you project that, that I'm a good person. I'm projecting that I'm a good person. You're not a good person. You're a moron. Moron for putting that flag. Look, if you honestly know the issues and you put that flag up there because you're sincerely with the Ukrainian people, I apologize. I apologize. You have every right to do that. But the vast majority of the people out there don't have a clue. And I've rambled on. I apologize, Danny, but
no, it's great. It's great that you launched. I think this is a really good place to continue on from. I mean, I am on that side too. I do not believe that all war is unjust, that there isn't some, I do believe that anti-war does not mean pacifism, because pacifism, this just, again, you said it, history. We have to look at it, even just recent history. A lot of people who came into reacting to what Russia engaged in beginning around this time last year, I know we're still about 11 days from the anniversary, but even building up to that, there was a lot of people reacting to what was going to happen. There was a lot of Russophobia, a lot of Cold War fears being drummed up. And immediately, especially the liberal class, but really Americans and people in the West across the board, were taken for a ride. They were taken for a propaganda ride. And it was so easy to just forget everything if they ever were aware of the fact that their governments have been waging the most brutal wars since the end of World War II, especially. But it's like all that history gone, even recent history. Forget Iraq, forget Afghanistan, forget Iraq. I know you've been speaking about this in your articles. It's like, yeah, the U.S. killed 1 million plus people. It's not like the U.S. is out of that conflict 100% either. So all the history is forgotten, and then it was like Russia's bad, Russia's bad, Russia's bad. But here we are now, after all these escalations, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian people, soldiers dead, thousands of Russians dead as well. And now you have the collective was so unhinged, so unable to acknowledge the reality on the ground. Now they're even talking about fighter jets and having these funny conversations around each other. They're not having it with each other because it's all coming out in the media. Rishi Sunak in the UK saying, yeah, have all the fighter jets you want, Zelensky. And then Ben Wallace we
don't have any.
He says, we don't have any. And so that's happening. But I've been hearing, and I think that this is true, like Ukraine is not going to be able to operate fighter jets, even if they were to get there to be flown. So that means, do you think this is what this means? That there's going to be NATO, pilots flying these jets? And if so, that's World War. What do you think about that? Because that would be World War III. We know that this because of what the collective West is doing, the U.S. and its allies, what they're doing, they're moving it in that direction. They've been doing that since the beginning. What's your take on you said a bit about the weapons and how they're so ineffective and likely not going to be used, but overall, now that they're talking about, more and more heavier and heavier, more and more dangerous weaponry, it feels like it's like they want it to become an out and out confrontation, even while they're talking out the side of their mouth that they don't.
Yeah, this first of all, let's understand the following thing. And I can speak to this because even though I'm not a pilot, big hint, glasses. I am a naval aviator. I was trained as what they call a naval aerial observer. I flew in the back seat of OV-10 aircraft, OA-4 aircraft, and these were dual control aircraft. So we learned how to land them. It was important to learn how to land them because the ejection seats were that if let's say the pilot got knocked unconscious, I would eject, but because I'm ejecting from the rear, the pilot would not eject. Only if the pilot ejected, we both went out. But if I ejected, the pilot stayed. The pilot's like, hey, that means I die. So I'd like to teach you how to land this airplane so you don't eject and kill me. So, I've got a little bit of knowledge about about aircraft and flying them, etc. I never flew them in combat, thank goodness, because nobody should ever want to go to combat. But it's not easy to fly an airplane. I mean, yeah, you can remember it's not just taking off. Yeah, you can learn how to take off. It's not just turning left, turning right, climbing, lowering, and then landing. That's just basic stuff. That's airplane 101. Now you've got to learn how to maneuver. You've got to learn important things like, airspeed. As you do a certain maneuver, you're bleeding off your airspeed. You have to be aware of where you are vis-a-vis the other aircraft orientation. You have to be aware of weapon systems, so that when you do a certain maneuver, if you bleed off the airspeed and he has altitude, he can continue and he will come in and he will kill you every single time. You have to be cognizant of this the whole time. And that isn't even something you get in training. That gets from doing it over and over and over and over again till it becomes second nature. And here's the thing. Ukraine has a number of pilots that are quite competent in flying MiGs. I mean, let's not denigrate. We know the Ghost of Kiev was a joke and made up, but there's some pretty good Ukrainian pilots out there. Look, I tell you what, the guys I want to meet are the Ukrainians that flew those hips into Mariupol during the siege to evacuate people. I want to meet those guys and I want to shake their hand, not because I support their cause, but my God, what kind of pilots they are. These guys were flying nap of the earth through, Russian air defense, finding the gap, and they were able to get into a city a part under siege, pick people up and leave. Some of them got shot down. Some of them lost their lives, but many of them made it. They evacuated a bunch of people out of there. I want to meet these guys and shake their hands because that's good flying. And if they have helicopter pilots that are that good, I guarantee you they got some other pilots, some MiG pilots or Sukhoi pilots that are pretty good too. But here's the deal. They're good because they've been flying a specific airframe and they know these avionics. It's second nature. Anytime you get into combat training, there's a reason why you repeat everything. And other people are like, this is boring. No, do it over again. Why? Muscle memory. You see, when you get trained, half the time you had a good night's sleep and all this stuff. The best way to train people is when they're exhausted and you're blowing things up in their ears and you punch them in the face continuously. You can't do that anymore. But the idea is to stress them. So it's muscle memory. So that when you go to combat and the world blows up to hell, you're able to function because you're not thinking, you're doing. Muscle memory. And that's the same thing for pilots. You're up in the air and suddenly things are happening and it's muscle memory, baby. You're doing what you've been trained to do based upon the avionics that you're prepared to do, the weapon systems and everything. And so you got guys that are good with MiGs. The South Carolina Air National Guard has a 6-month program that they've been doing for the last couple decades now to transition former Warsaw Pact nations like Bulgaria, Romania, the Czech Republic, etc., Poles, who have transitioned from MiGs to F-16s. So they bring these pilots, and for 6 months they go through an advanced transition program. So at the end of the pipeline, they come out and they can fly the F-16. But the Air Force instructors there say they're not very good at the F-16 because when we stress them, they go back to MiG. And the MiG ain't the F-16. And so they'll make a mistake, they'll bleed off airspeed wrong, and they're dead. They said the best pilots are the ones that never had any MiG training. Their brains are clean. So we transition them, and so the muscle memory they're getting is F-16. If you give F-16s to Ukrainian pilots, they're all going to get shot down, 100% guarantee. They're alive today because they know how to fly the MiG. They know how to fly the Sukhoi. They know the airframe. They're able to do really, really skillful stuff. The fact that these guys are still flying this long into a war where Russia has so much superiority tells you these are good pilots. Some of the best in the world probably at what they do. Again, those helicopter pilots, I want to meet them because, my God, I just want to shake the hand of a pilot that could pull that off. That's good stuff. And I'm sure there's a couple of these Ukrainian pilots that I'd like to meet. Now, again, I don't support their cause, but I have to respect skill when you see it. And these guys are good, but they can't fly the F-16. They cannot fly the F-16. So now we come to the crux of the issue. During the Korean War, when the Russians or the North Koreans started flying the MiG-15 aircraft, and we didn't have we didn't have to bring in the F-86 Super Sabre. But now, so you have two relatively similar airframes going up against each other. And the North Koreans were getting shot down and the Chinese were getting shot down. So they stiffened them up by bringing in Soviet pilots. And the Soviet pilots were in there flying combat missions. And, they're pretty good because that's their airframe. They know it. So the reason why I bring that up is we live in a world where, how do I say this without being sexist? We used to call it big boy pants. Put on your big boy pants. But we're in a world now where men and women are equal. So let's just say put on your big person pants or skirt, whatever you want to call it. Your adult clothes. Well, why don't we say that? Put on your adult clothes. Be an adult. And so it's not World War III if a Polish pilot gets sheep dipped or a Czech pilot gets sheep dipped or that's just called the real world. And the Russians, they're adults. They're not going to be happy about this. But I invariably think that if the F-16 is introduced, there will be a certain percentage of former NATO pilots flying these airframes for the Ukrainians, because that's the only way it would be viable. Now, let me also tell you, they will all get shot down. Want to know why? Because they need to communicate with AWACS airplanes. Now, there will be an AWACS, that's an airborne warning and control system airplane, the E-3 Sentry with the big old spinning disc on top. You might have seen it, and it'll fly near the battlefield. It projects its radar out. It detects anything taking off, moving around, and then it provides the situational awareness to the F-16s to vector them towards a threat or away from a threat. So the F-16 has to operate in that environment. If the AWACS gets in the business of directing these aircraft, that AWACS is a target and will be shot down. So it won't be. So now these planes are going to have to operate on their own. And now you see the F-16 is part of a system, a systemic process of projecting air power. Remove the AWACS, remove the intelligence, and now you just have two pilots flying, wingmen, Maverick and Goose. Goose was his backseater. Oh, Maverick and Iceman. Yeah. So they're off doing their Maverick Iceman thing. But without the AWACS, the Russians are going to get vectored in and shoot them down every single time. Plus, nobody's flown against the kind of integrated air defense that the Russians have to bear. The Ukrainians have. This is why they don't have too many pilots left, because they're all dead or shot down. The ones who are alive know how to go very low and fly very limited missions and get in, get out. But if you want to actually turn this into something that's going to have an impact on the battlefield, that means that you're going to have to project and try and sweep Russian air power out. And then you have to do suppression of enemy air defense, come in and bomb the Russian air defenses to open up a gap where the F-16s can come in and provide close air support to have an impact on the battlefield. None of this is going to happen. None of that's going to happen. So let's stop talking fiction. The F-16 will have zero impact on the battlefield. Zero. In fact, it will make the Ukrainians even weaker, because right now, they're able to sortie Su-25s to go out and bomb Russian positions with some of the best pilots in the world who are doing the impossible. If you transition them into F-16s, they will be shot down the second take off. That's just the facts. They have some Su-27s out there. They're still flying. If you transition them to the F-16, they will die. They have some MiG-29s. Transition, they will die. The best thing you could do for the Ukrainians is give them the airframes that they know how to fly. But we're not doing that because we somehow think that we need to up the bat. And Zelensky's half the problem. Zelensky be saying, just give me the MiGs, give me the Sukhois, and we'll take care of it. But instead, he's like, give me the F-16s. No, you don't want F-16. It's the same thing. Zelensky would be far better off getting T-72s upgraded because his troops know how to maintain it and use it. But instead, he's saying, give me the Leopard 2. It is a coffin. It is a moving coffin. It will get killed because A, there's not enough of them, and B, the Ukrainians don't know how to use them properly. And again, it's like a fighter plane. It's not just about, can I turn the tank on? Can I go forward? Can I go backwards? Can I turn the turret around? Wow. Yes, you can. But again, combat is about muscle memory, muscle memory, muscle memory, muscle. And you have a 3-man crew transition into a 4-man crew because there's no automatic loader. You have another loader. And now the tank commander, boom, shell goes off. He starts to give orders based upon a 3-man crew instruction. The gunner's wondering what's going on. Bam, you're dead because the Russians just took you out. That's going to happen to every single Leopard 2 that's going to go on the battlefield. This is stupid. I don't understand why we think there's going to be these miracle weapons, these wonder weapons. They're not. And I'll just leave you with this one, that this is the most disturbing aspect of this. Even more disturbing than the fact that we're slaughtering Ukrainians by giving them these weapons. The Germans are providing Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. I want everybody to chew on that for a second. Because look, I'll get a little personal here, because this is personal, and it should be personal for every American who had a relative fight in World War II. I had an uncle, and he went across the Normandy beach about D+4. So the big fighting was over, but there were still bodies bobbing there. There's still things, but they came in, and then he had a relatively easy time in the battle for France, the breakthrough and all that. But they got up to Belgium, and then all hell broke loose, the Battle of the Bulge. And in one day, he lost 250 guys in his company from German artillery, and their bodies are buried in the Luxembourg City Cemetery. And I've been there. I went with him. He broke down. He cried. I mean, this is a stoic man. This is a guy who worked, when the war ended, he went to work for Kellogg's in Kalamazoo, and he made cornflakes, and that was his life. He smoked, and he ended up dying of cancer. But but you wouldn't have known that he had been to World War II. But he had asked when he came to visit us in Germany, he said, "Could you show me these things?" And we took him there. When he came to the place where the 88s took out the trucks carrying his men, he fell to his knees and he just cried like a baby. And then we went to the cemetery, and he couldn't handle it. I mean, deeply emotional. And so you say, well, why did we do that to him? Why did we lose those people that are buried in the cemetery? And the idea should be that they died for a cause, and the cause was to defeat Nazi Germany, which means never again should we allow Nazi Germany to come up. Now the Germans operate with this never again also. This notion of never again will we allow Germany to manifest itself in a manner that gives rise to the Third Reich and the murder of 6 million Jews. But it's more than 6 million Jews that we're talking about. I know that's that legitimately so. People focus on that, as they should. But there were 27 million Russians. There were another 6 to 8 million Poles. I mean, the Germans killed everybody. They were equal opportunity employers when it came to the death machine. And and the idea was never again. There was a guy named Henry Morgenthau. He was the Secretary of Treasury in 1944 for Roosevelt, and he came up with the Morgenthau Plan. The Morgenthau Plan said, never again can we allow Germany to bring together the nexus of industrialism, nationalism, and militarism. And that the Germans had already had 2 shots. World War I they got once, and then World War II. So we're not going to give them a chance to make World War III. He said, that's it. We're going to dismember Germany. We're going to deindustrialize it. They will never be allowed to do this again. Never again. But instead, we said we need a German industry to help with the Marshall Plan, the rebuilding of Europe, etc. But the idea is that Germany would be constrained in their power, that they wouldn't become a militaristic thing. And the biggest checks and balance came from Germany itself that said, never again, never again, never again. Willy Brandt, people should remember Willy Brandt when he went to Poland in the early 1970s, I think 72, and he visited the Warsaw Ghetto. It had been suppressed by Nazis slaughtering Poles and Jews, and he fell to his knees begging forgiveness, as he should have, as every German should. Germans can never forget what they did. Well, I didn't do it, Scott. I wasn't born. I'm sorry, man. You're a German, and you inherited that. That there's that old biblical phrase that the sons don't inherit the sins of the father. Not now, baby. Germany, all you Germans, you inherited the sins of the father, and you must live with those sins and never again allow itself to be manifested in a manner that brings together the nexus of nationalism, industrialism, and militarism. And yet you're sending Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine to kill Russians. You have forgotten the lesson of history. Never again is meaningless. And this is where every American should stand up and say, no, Germany, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to make that decision. You're not a sovereign nation in this regard. You lost that right when you allowed Adolf Hitler to take over in 1936. You lost that right when you allowed Adolf Hitler to march his armies throughout Europe into the Soviet Union. You don't have the right to send German tanks to Ukraine to kill Russians. Not at all. And yet we just seem to be oblivious to it. If you had a relative who fought and died in World War II, you had better go study the history of that sacrifice and understand that what's happening today is an insult to everybody who served, everybody who sacrificed. American and Soviet alike, 27 million Soviets lost their lives. Now, the Russians remember this, but we have tended to forget it. We tend to poo-poo it. No, man, the Germans don't get a pass on this one. I know that I might This might be just Scott Ritter's little personal opinion, and that's okay. But I hold it, and I hold it strongly. Germany doesn't get a pass. They don't get to send tanks. There they are, but they shouldn't be able to.
Yeah, and the United States was egging it on. I mean, there was that debate at Ramstein Air Base, with the whole defense contact group, back and forth, and it was the United States that said, "Germany, you better do this. You need to do this. You're our ally. Step up." And then Germany put up a pathetic little fight, tried to say, "Oh, well, you send your M1 Abrams first, and then maybe we'll get to it." Of course, what ended up happening was they all just agreed to send whatever pitiful amount they decided to throw, or pledge, I should say. I know you correct us a lot. Pledged these tanks, but of course we know that there's a lot of a lot of mystery about whether these will ever reach the battlefield. But you mentioned Germany a lot, and I definitely want to get to. So for everyone watching, Patreon subscribers can submit questions, YouTube members can submit questions, and Substack members can submit questions. And if you have super chats, you can submit questions there as well. You can find all those links in the description, and we're going to get to some Patreon questions in a minute. But since you brought it up, Germany, I think we got to talk. I need to get your take on the Nord Stream revelation from Mr. Seymour Hersh, of course, the renowned journalist, award-winning, heavily decorated, someone who rarely gets things wrong. But of course, we're talking about a revelation from a source. Of course, we don't know who the source comes from, but we know Seymour Hersh is very well connected. And if anyone read the piece on his Substack, you know that it's a very convincing piece, especially given all that we knew about the Nord Stream pipelines, the destruction of them, all of the basically outright hints, if not admissions, that Biden and Blinken and essentially the entire U.S. foreign policy establishment, Victoria Nuland, we're all giving about Nord Stream 2 and the destruction of the pipelines. What was your reaction to this? Because it's a very significant, I think, development. And when I think about Germany here, I just think about, wow, Germany has really bent the knee to the United States. It is throughout this whole conflict, I've thought incredible. Like, Germany is actually getting hit some of the hardest economically, politically from this. The costs are huge for Germany, and yet it still walks in lockstep behind on a leash in the heel position with the United States. What was your thoughts about the Nord Stream revelations?
Cy Hersh is a quarter of a century. He's been a friend of mine. So I have to say right up the bat that I'm strongly biased in favor of Cy Hersh. I've personally been investigated by him. I know the rigor that he takes, and for 25 years I've been literally at the front row as he comes up with some of his most amazing scoops, Abu Ghraib, etc. I knew nothing about this article before it was written. Knew nothing. I had a hint that he might be thinking about going to Substack, but so I don't have any insights. I can't sit here and tell you I know Cy's source. I don't know Cy's source. What I can say though is that he got a Pulitzer Prize for a reason, and he got a lot of I think they're Peabody Awards or Polk Awards or something like that. Got a lot of those for a reason. And if Cy writes it, you have to treat it seriously. Look, everybody gets it wrong. I think he got burned on a source with JFK book, and he got burned on a source. If you're a reporter doing the business, you're going to get burned on a source, no matter what you do. Could he have been burned on this source? Maybe, but I doubt it. But here's the thing. Everybody's focused on the sexy stuff. The bombs. Tick, 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 tick. The sonar booty. Beep, 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 beep. Boom, boom, boom. Wow. I mean, this is a Tom Clancy movie, man. You could actually make a movie out of this. This is pretty cool stuff. Divers training.
We may see it. We may see a movie eventually.
We see the movie, maybe Cuba Gooding can come back and play the role of the diver, Danny De Niro, Robert De Niro, 1 step forward, 2 step, I mean, it would be great. It would be just like, oh my God, I want to see this movie. But there's more to this story than that's there. First of all, understand that if Cy's source is true, Biden is a criminal. And I'm not just talking about a war criminal. Hell, every American president's been a war criminal. So that's, get in line, Joe.
Mm.
He's a criminal because he violated the Constitution of the United States with intent. Mens rea is a term that I've learned in the legal frame, the intent. He plotted with Victoria Nuland, with Jake Sullivan, with Tony Blinken, with the CIA director. They plotted to specifically craft a mechanism to avoid reporting to Congress, to carry out an act of war. So understand this. Cy Hirsch's article should be used as the basis of an indictment against the President of the United States for impeachment for violating the Constitution of the United States of America. And several other people that I just named should likewise be indicted, arrested, found guilty at trial, because they would be found guilty at trial, and then in prison for a very long time. Now, this will never happen because we never do this in America, which shows you how shallow we are as a nation. But if it didn't jump out, let me say something else. I don't mean to insult people, but please reflect with me for a second. Join me in this moment of self-reflection. If you read that article and the first thing that didn't jump out is that we need to impeach Joe Biden for violating the Constitution, then you don't know the Constitution. And if you're calling yourself an American citizen and you don't know the Constitution, you're not a very good citizen, because that which defines us as a collective is the Constitution. That's the only thing that defines us. That's what unites us. That's what gets a redneck from Texas hanging out with a liberal from New York City. That's what makes us Americans, the Constitution. You take the Constitution away and we're nothing, baby. We are nothing. Nothing. There is no glue. The glue is the Constitution. And if you don't know the Constitution, you're not a very good American. So if you read it and you didn't go impeach right now, you got a problem. But then there's something else that you got that jumps out at you. We attacked our friend, Germany. It's an act of war. We carried out an economic Pearl Harbor against a nation that we claim to be friends and allies with. And we colluded with another NATO ally to do this. And even though Norway was the trigger puller with us, it's like any crime. If you're driving the getaway car and the murder takes place in the bank, you're a murderer. And there's a lot of murderers out there. Germany, wake up. Nobody likes you. Everybody's conspiring against you. And America attacked you. And you're doing nothing about it. Now, there's a term, and I won't use it out of respect for you, but it begins with a C. And it ends with old. And you can fill in the gaps. And that's what Germany has become, because they're allowing this to happen and they're not doing anything about it. Olaf Scholz knows darn well who attacked Nord Stream. Everybody in Germany knows darn well. And yet they're like the abused spouse, just going, no, I fell down. The bruise. No, he didn't hit me. He didn't hit me. No, Germany is the abused spouse and America is the abuser. And everybody's pretending that nothing happened. We're just turning a blind eye. Guys, we attacked a nation we claim to be friends. Now, I know. I just told you that we're not friends with anybody. And just take a look at the Ukraine, the proof. But Germany, we attacked them. It's an act of war. And now comes the really interesting part. April 1st was we could have ended the war. This war could have ended on April 1st. Ukraine was ready to sign a peace agreement with Russia. It could have come to an end. All the angst and anxiety that we have today would be gone. We'd actually hopefully be not only repairing relations with Russia, but we could actually be engaged in serious arms control discussions with Russia about START and getting another START treaty in play. The current one expires in 2026. There is no automatic extension anymore. We already did that one, which means when it expires, it's gone. And when you lose this one, that means both arsenals are going to be expanding up at a time when there's high tension. And that is a recipe for disaster. One mistake, one miscalculation, one misunderstanding, bam, and the world ends. And when I say end, guys, I mean goodbye. Lights out. You're never going to wake up because it's all over. We seem to be oblivious to that. Oh, nuclear war. Well, no, it ain't theoretical, dudes. It's real. The weapons are out there. They're ready to be used right now. Right now, they're ready to be used. The only thing holding them back is arms control, and that arms control is about to go away. So wouldn't it be nice to be engaged with them? And we could have been had there been a peace treaty on April 1st. But now we come back to old Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe. Sleepy Joe stood there on February 7th of last year, and he said, if the Russians invade Ukraine, tanks across the border, Nord Stream 2 be no more. And a reporter actually said, what do you mean? That's Germany. It'll be no more. It sounds like a confession to me after the fact. I mean, he basically confessed it. Victoria Nuland said the same thing. But Russian tanks went across on February 24th. On April 1st, Nord Stream 2 was still in play. And had there been a peace treaty, Nord Stream 2 would have stayed in play. Nord Stream 1 would have continued to pump billions of cubic meters of gas into Germany. And then Germany's economy would still be dependent upon Russia, Russian gas and European economy, et cetera, which means that everybody's paying low prices, their industries are working, et cetera. We sabotaged that peace treaty. Why? Because we wanted to blow up Nord Stream. And if you read Cy's article, you'll see that after April 1st, we started moving things in motion. That's when we got serious, because we realized that this conflict could come to an end. We have to blow up these things. And therefore, we held the exercise, Bolt Ops 22 in June. And bam, September, we blow it up. That's what this is all about. And I hope everybody understands what I'm saying here, that this war was never about, it may be about Ukraine, but it's turned into something different. It's about America creating the conditions for American hegemony, economic-based hegemony, that isn't just about strangling Russia through sanctions and bleeding them dry and white in the war. It's about bringing down the European Union, bringing down the Eurozone, bringing down Germany. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline in order to send a signal to Germany, France, and all of Europe that we're in charge. We're taking over. And what have we done? We've replaced cheap Russian gas with expensive American liquid natural gas. We've destroyed their economies. And yet Europe just sits there and goes, more, boss, more, give me more. I mean, this is disturbing. So this is why Cy Hirsch's article is genius, because he has basically put the pieces in place that allow all of these things to become crystal clear. Just, in the intelligence business, I had a good reputation for doing a couple things. One is identifying dots, because in the intelligence business, it's like getting one of those 1,000 piece puzzles, and they shake it up and they throw it on the table, and then they take their arm and they take 80% of them off the table, and you got 20% left, and they said, "Tell me what it is." And you're going, "Well, I only got 20% of the pieces," but you got to put it together, connect the dots, and then you come up with an idea of what it is. That's what intelligence is. And sometimes you get good and you can uncover a couple more pieces and bring it in, but you never have 100% of the pieces. I was good at identifying the dots and connecting the dots. What Hirsch's article did is identify the dots, and now it's up to us to connect them. And it's quite obvious. I mean, he literally has giant signs that say, this dot goes here, this dot goes here. And I just hope that people appreciate this man. He's 85 years old. And I hope this man lives forever. But he is a national treasure. And right now he has done America and the world a great service, And we don't deserve him, but we got him. So let's do something honorable by him.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you said it, the precedent that this has set, just the situation when it comes, Germany, the cost, it still baffles me. I see the clip all the time. Joe Biden and Olaf Scholz, February 7th, 2022. They knew, it was so obvious that there was something going on here. How could you not know that Nord Stream was already being targeted by sanctions? There was sanctions talk. Yeah. Stop, bring it down. Don't allow Nord Stream 2 to run. The Americans wagging their finger. Germany, you've got to wean off of Russian gas. Already back then, this is before Russia's special military operation. And then it happens, and Germany whistling past the graveyard, and look at who's benefited. The United States and Norway. Norway has benefited mightily from this too. They have their own pipeline that has that I think was launched.
The day after.
So the day after, and now is pumping its own LNG and
into Poland, and then Poland's reselling it to Germany at a profit.
Yeah.
Once again, the Germans just get it on all ends. I mean,
and then you see the IMF forecast for Germany, very gloomy, and who knows if that will even hold in terms of, they're going the opposite direction. Unlike when you see like China, for example, they up the growth. With Germany, unclear if they'll make it to even zero growth this year. So it's absolutely incredible. And you're right. The precedent is just, I don't know if you have any final comments on this, but the precedent is I think just so in your face in terms of the situation that Germany and Europe has found itself in and has gotten itself into, playing poodle, playing, dog wag the tail with the United States.
No, I mean, I think you wrapped it. All I'd be doing is repeating what we've already talked about. I mean, this is literally Germany is pathetic. Europe is pathetic. And it's tragic because we're supposed to be their friends. I mean, the biggest pathetic thing about here is America, because we have a government that, everything we touch dies. Think about it. Everything we touch dies. We're poison. We're poison for the world.